some of you guys out there in the audience might recognize me. You might have met me at the airport, at Ben Gurion Airport in Israel, at some crazy hour of the morning or the night. Maybe you were staffing a Birthright trip. Maybe you were a student on a Birthright trip. Still others of you, maybe you bought a piece of jewelry from me at a Hillel conference. And maybe others of you learned this amazing nigun that I've been teaching for years and years and years. But what you don't know about me is that when I was 9 years old, I had really long hair, and it got really, really tangled. Yeah, that's me. It got really, really tangled, and my parents couldn't run a comb through it, so I had to wear braids all the time. About the same time, about when I was that age, about 9 years old, my parents took us, the children, downtown in Washington, D.C., to stand in a straight line across from the Soviet embassy every Sunday from 12 to 12:15, to let the world know that we as Jews cared what was happening to the Jews of Russia, and that we wanted them to be able to leave and them to be able to celebrate if they wanted to. I was 9. I wanted to go play with my friends. Why was I being taken every single Sunday to stand in a straight line in front of the Soviet embassy? Like, who cared? Did it even matter? Was it going to make any difference at all? I had all sorts of those questions when I was 9. And I think I still have all of those questions, if not more, today. Do I matter? Am I enough? Is the work that I do important enough? I'm a single woman in my 50s, without children and without a partner, living in Jerusalem, in this phenomenal city built around family. And I don't have one. And I often feel isolated, and I often feel alone, and I often feel like I don't matter enough. Years later, I was still very, very involved in the Soviet Jewry movement, the movement that told the world that we cared, that the Jews of Russia were important to us. I did all sorts of crazy things. I was arrested in front of the UN when the President of the United States was meeting with the President of Russia. I wore this bracelet on my arm with someone's name on it that turned my arm green. I wore it for like years and years. And I lobbied in front of Congress and Senate all the time. But one day, I got a phone call from a very dear friend of mine who worked at Yale Hillel. And he whispered in the phone to me, "Esther, do you want to go to Russia with me?" And I was like, "Micha, I can't hear you. Can you say that a little louder? What are you talking about?" And he asked me again if I wanted to go to Russia. Back then, they would send young people, I was 26 or 27, as if we were married or as if we were lovers. We were sent in by the Israeli government to meet secretly with Jews in Russia who were refused visas to go to Israel. We were young Jews thinking about maybe possibly someday living in Israel, and they wanted us to teach about Zionism as free Jews. And it was all in secret. I couldn't tell my parents, it was on Pesach. I couldn't tell my parents that I wasn't coming home. We were sent, I thought to myself, what am I doing? What? Do I want to do this? This sounds really scary. But I thought I would just start the process. We were sent to New York City, and we were trained in this room for 6 hours, and they taught us all sorts of things, like how to sew Judaica into our suitcases, and what would happen if we got caught, and how to write people's names down in code on pieces of paper, and then rip them up and burn them and flush them down the toilet, all so that we wouldn't get anybody else in trouble. I decided I'm not missing this, I'm going. So we went. We went in through the airport in Moscow. Now, Micha, my partner, he was wearing a brown corduroy jacket with like the patches on the elbows, and he got right through security. I, of course, got nervous and got stopped. And so I'm standing on one side, the security guards are on the other side. First there's one guard, then there's another guard, a third, a fourth, a fifth. There was like 10 or 15 guards by the time they finished with me. And they're taking away my matzah, and they're taking away my wine, and we're going back and forth and back and forth. And I'm petrified. I had a little button. I was wearing jeans that day, and I had a little button in the little pocket of the jeans, inside of the big pocket of the jeans. And the button said, "Free Boris Klotz." Boris Klotz was a man who lived in then Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, and he was adopted by the city of Boston. The Jewish community of Boston wanted him to know that he was loved. And they wanted me to bring him that button. So my friend Jeffrey had been sent in before me, and he had been strip searched. And that was the thing I was most frightened of. And I figured, even if I get strip searched, they won't find the button. And they had sent me a whole bunch of articles about him. And I bought lots and lots of women's magazines, and I stapled the women's magazines. I stapled the articles inside the women's magazines. And they're asking me questions, and there's all these men, and they're yelling at me, and it's so scary. And they find my magazines, and they open them up, one by one. And I'm standing there thinking, I'm okay. I stapled it. Nothing's gonna happen. And all of a sudden, as they're opening up my magazines, one falls out. And it says, "Jews rally for Boris Klotz." And I can't breathe. And they start screaming at me, "Who's Boris Klotz?" I don't know. "Well, how do you know Boris Klotz?" I don't know. I stood there lying for 45 minutes as more and more and more men screamed and yelled at me if I knew this man named Boris Klotz. And all of a sudden, I was 9 years old again. What am I doing this for? Is this worth it? Is it going to even make a difference? Does it matter at all? After 45 minutes, they let me go. To this day, I have no idea why they let me go. And I came out, and I fell into Micha's arms, and I said, "Micha, they're going to kill Boris Klotz. And it's my fault." We were there in Russia for 17 days and 17 nights. And we were scheduled to visit Boris on the very last day. I had nightmares every single night that they had taken him away. On the very last day, I said to Micha, "We have to go find him." Now, he didn't answer the phone, so he had no idea we were coming. And we went to his apartment, and he lived on the 19th floor. And we got into the apartment building. There's no elevator, and there's no light in the stairwell. And we start hiking up the steps. I'm so scared. What if he's not there? What if they took him away? What if the police have him? And I said to Micha, we just have to go. And we're up the steps, and I can't breathe because I'm out of shape. We get to the top, and the door opens. We knock on the door. I'm so scared. We knock on the door really hard. And the door opens, and this man says, "Hello, mina zavut Boris." "Hello, my name is Boris." And I burst out crying. And he says, "Who are you? And why are you crying on my doorstep?" And we went inside the apartment, and we told him who we were. We were the very first people that came from outside of Russia to see him, to let him know that he was loved, to let him know that we saw him, and to let him know that he mattered. A few days earlier in the trip, we went to a different apartment. And as the door opened, I walked in, and the first thing the woman says to me was like, "Hi, Esther, you wear a lot of bracelets." Now, those of you that know me well know that I love bracelets. And I said, "Yeah, I guess. I wear a lot of bracelets." I had no idea what she meant. She pulled me into the apartment, and she said, "One more won't make a difference." Okay. And she pulled out from the closet a tri-gold bracelet, 3 different colors of gold, a beautiful bracelet that had belonged to her great-grandmother. And she said, "I want you to take this bracelet. I want you to wear it every single day. And one day, I will see you in Jerusalem, and you'll give me back the bracelet." Wow. I didn't know what to do. They told us not to take anything out of Russia because we could get caught. We could get in trouble. We could get sent away. We left the apartment, and I said to Micha, "We have to figure this out. We have to figure out what to do. How can we do this?" And we decided to go to the market, and we bought lots and lots and lots and lots more bracelets. I had tons of bracelets up and down my arm, and I always had a bracelet in the middle. And we went back to the Moscow airport. Remember, I had gotten hassled going in, so I knew I'd get hassled going out. And I would throw her bracelet down first, and then throw all the other bracelets on top. And we got through security. I wore that bracelet every single day for 2 years. I never took it off. I wore it in the shower. 2 years later, I'm with a group of AE Pi students from University of Pennsylvania, Hillel, before Birthright. Imagine the scene. We're in Jerusalem. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. It's freezing cold. And we're in one of these rooms without any windows that are really ugly. And we're sitting, and the man in front of us from the Jewish agency is talking about the Jews of Russia. And he's going on and on and on, and it's not super interesting. And all the students are sleeping. We've all been there, right? There's not a lot you can do about it. You just have to get through 30 minutes and figure you'll never see him again. So as they're all sleeping, all of a sudden, the door to my right opens. And the man, the husband of the bracelet lady, walks in. And he looks at me, and he winks. And he goes to the front of the circle. And I lose it, and I whap the guy on my right, and I whap the guy on my left, and they all start waking up. And they're like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with Esther? Like, why is she not breathing? And he very quietly says, has anybody in this room ever been to Russia? And all the students were like, wait, Esther's been there, Esther, because they had heard all my stories. And I stood up, and he stood up. And I took off that bracelet for the very first time. And I said to him, I told your wife that I would meet you in Jerusalem, and I would give you back the bracelet. And all the students spontaneously started to dance all around us. And I remember thinking, this is it. This is a holy moment in my life. I got to show up, and he got to show up. I got to make a difference, and he got to make a difference in my life as well. I think I've been thinking about invisibility my entire life, certainly since I was 9. I think all of us feel invisible at different times of our lives. Think about our students. Those first-year students that are too scared to come to Hillel or go to a Jewish event because they don't feel Jewish enough. Or a student who's figuring out identity issues and battling with questions and doesn't feel safe enough to come out in the Jewish world. Or maybe a student who's finishing university and doesn't want to go out into the great big world because they're worried they'll be invisible. Or what about us, Hillel professionals? Those of us who don't feel Jewish enough to facilitate a Shabbat service. Or those of us who shut down in staff meetings because we don't think our voice is being heard. Or some of us sitting here today, whether it's our first conference or our 20th conference, that maybe feel invisible in a crowd full of people. What I've learned from that time in Russia and all the years in between that I've traveled back and forth is that when I show up, I feel less invisible. When I can jump into someone's story and they can jump into mine, I feel like I matter. When I see somebody and they see me, I'm not invisible. And we at Hillel get to do this every single day. We get to touch students' lives, and if we open our hearts and our souls, they can touch our lives, and we can make a huge difference in the world. תודה רבה.
לא נעף, לא נביט, לא נשים למפרטים, לא נגיע לארץ חדשה, לא נגיע